Thematic Session 1 title is an open and interconnected Indo-Pacific Maritime and Waterways connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, we have three presenters. Firstly, paper 1, Mr. Anwar, fellow Harvard Asia Center, Harvard University. And paper 2 will be presented by the Mr. Shoriful Islam, Assistant Professor, Russia University. He's a PhD candidate, Berbek Regional Cooperation Issues. And Ms. Niranti Shomarnaik, he's a Research Program Director, Strategy and Policy Analysis, CNA Corporation, DC, USA. We have very distinguished discussion today. Dr. Charles Morrison, he is an adjunct senior fellow and former president, East-West Center. He will join virtually. And our very respected Mr. Rear Admiral M.D. Khurshid Alam, Secretary Maritime Affairs Unit, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bangladesh. And Dr. Anamika Barua, Professor Ecological Economics, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, Assam, India. And Dr. Anashwa Bosru Rai Chaudhary, Senior Fellow, Neighborhood Initiative, Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata Chapter, India. Now I would humbly request our Honorable Director, distinguished diplomat, Ambassador Richard Tarek Karim, to moderate these first sessions. Thank you so much. Sir, please.
Good afternoon.
Ben?
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Welcome everyone. I see there are very few brave souls still staying on after the lunch, and I welcome you all back. This session is a thematic session, and as has been explained, into three scholars presenting papers, and then three practitioners or professionals who will actually either discuss it or give their own comments and views on the thematic scheme, which is an open and interconnected Indo-Pacific maritime and waterways connectivity. Now, the maritime and waterways connectivity for me personally is a subject I deeply resonate with. I mentioned in my earlier remarks in the inaugural session that South Asia, as we know it today, or the historical Indian subcontinent, was perhaps the most integrated region in the world. And within that, this overall...
Cannot hear anything, sorry, from the online side. We cannot hear you, sir.
You cannot hear us? 1 minute. Can you hear me now?
Not so clearly, but a little bit, the voice is not very clear.
Just let's sort out the technical glitches.
No.
Hello.
Huh?
I think the microphone is working, sir.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very audible. Yes.
Great. And you're all visible now. Thank you. Welcome all of you. Thank you very much for coming and for being with us. I know for a couple of you it's extremely challenging because it's the wee hours of the morning, and I shall keep that in mind and try and ease your pains as much as possible. So we have, as I had started saying, this session is on maritime and waterways connectivity, which will which will play into this theme of open and interconnected Indo-Pacific that we're talking about since the morning. For me, this is of particular relevance and importance because for the last almost 30 years of my career, I have single-mindedly tried to figure out how we can reconnect ourselves after having severed our connections post-1947. We still had waterways connectivity until 65, but the 65 war between India and Pakistan completely severed what existed. Before the British left, this was one vastly integrated, interconnected region. Our rivers connected us with each other. That is what enabled this region, the Greater Bengal region, historically, to be one of the richest regions in the world. At the height of Mughal rule, pre-colonial, pre-British period, Bengal alone contributed, according to one report, one can perhaps delve deeper into that, 40% of global GDP. And during the British period, the Bengal presidency was the largest of the three presidencies through which the British governed India. It had the highest GDP, and it boasted the highest per capita GDP, which was in the summer capital of Shillong. What happened to that? That's a question which Indians and Bangladeshis and everyone should ask themselves. Why did we lose it? We lost it because we severed our connectivity. We have been talking about improving trade. The World Bank country director said our trade figures intra-regional is abysmal, 5%. I agree. When SAARC was formed, it was only 2.5%. We can say it has increased 100% since 85, but 100% increase takes us to 5%, which is a fraction of what ASEAN does or the European Union or other regional groupings does. So we are far behind in that. Now, how do you expand trade if you do not allow borders to be permeable and allow people to cross, goods and services to cross freely without any hindrances? And that is the challenge that we have to overcome. It is essentially a challenge, I think, of the post-colonial New Westphalia paradigm that we all embraced, where borders became so hard that they are impenetrable. Not just impenetrable in the physical sense, they have become impenetrable even in the intellectual and mental sense. So that is how, so reconnecting the rivers is very, very important because the rivers nurtured a very rich riverine economy. It was an economy based on the rivers. And we have to come somehow get that back. We are in the process. It's been slow, but it is happening. With those words, I would like to call on several, on the paper presenters first. The first paper will be presented by Mr. Anu Anwar, Fellow at the Harvard Asia Center, Harvard University, who's joined us online. I welcome Anu Anwar to our gathering virtually. He's a Fellow of Arts and Sciences and an Associate in Research at the John K. Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies. He is also an Asia 21 Fellow at the Asia Society. And he will be talking, he explores the geopolitical implications of the Belt and Road Initiative and free and open Indo-Pacific strategy in the Indo-Pacific region. His paper is Positioning Bay of Bengal in the Great Game of the Indo-Pacific Fulcrum. I love that title. The Great Game. We have been hostage and subjects and a merciless subject of that. I'm waiting eagerly to listen to what you have to say about this new great game. Welcome, Anwar.
Thank you, Ambassador Karim. It's my great pleasure to be part of this great event. Particularly, I have personal honored to be sharing this screen with one of my mentor for years, Dr. Charles Morrison, and I personally want to thank him to participate in this event despite their late night at Honolulu now. With that, I will share my screen for. Okay, so this paper, I try to address that the Bay of Bengal as a distant waterway, how it position in the greater Indo-Pacific geopolitical calculation. So with that, if we look at how the Indo-Pacific concept itself emerged over the period of time, we have seen that this concept, so-called Indo-Pacific, has been used by a German scholar in 1920s. And 1940s, we have seen that some Indian scholars also used this Indo-Pacific concept. However, in recent time, the concept basically become operationalized and popularized all over the world when Japanese former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe used so-called confluence of two seas in his address in the Indian Parliament in 2007. And after that, we have seen that US government, Australian government, and other countries also come up with more operationalized and official document. However, we have to keep in mind here that even during Obama administration, Hillary Clinton first wrote an article about the future of America in the Asia Pacific that particularly noted that American aspiration to the so-called pivot to Asia. And in the subsequent year, we have seen this concept had emerged in a greater length. However, if we look at the map on the right-hand side, you can see that before the Indo-Pacific, there was a concept that was popular and has been operationalized, and that is Asia-Pacific. Basically, it was around the Pacific Ocean, the west coast of the US to the ended basically Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, this area. So in the Pacific, basically the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean together is a kind of conceptual map that transcends the division between the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. And also, we have seen that with the rise of China and Asian tigers and other countries, the global geopolitical shift has been changed to this Asian country. So previous Asia-Pacific framework was somehow limited to address the rising challenges and geopolitical reality in this part of the world, and therefore that also rationalized the concept of Indo-Pacific. And then the Indo-Pacific, this geography consists of 36 countries. We start with the west coast of US to the west coast of India. We have seen that 50% of the world's population live in this area, where the top three largest world economy also located in the Indo-Pacific. 5 of the 10 most populous country and the 5 largest Muslim majority country also located in the Indo-Pacific, and the 7 of the world's 10 largest standing military, 5 of them is the declared nuclear power. So this fact basically say the importance and the weight and the depth and breadth of the Indo-Pacific region. And now, where does the Bay of Bengal exist in this Indo-Pacific calculation? We have seen that the Bay of Bengal, basically historically known as the part of underdeveloped natural disaster prone, and this kind of region has been known in that way. But it get a kind of momentum under the Indo-Pacific strategy, and definitely Chinese Belt and Road Initiative also contributed to this calculation, and we have seen that 1/4 of the world's population even lives in the Bay of Bengal region, and total size of the GDP of the Bay of Bengal country is around 3 trillion. And even if we look at the geopolitical location, geographical location of the Bay of Bengal, it connects Northeast Asia and the ASEAN and the SAARC. In the middle of the ASEAN and SAARC, and Bay of Bengal Bay of Bengal provide a kind of connector and transport hub for the Northeast Asian countries such as Japan, China, Korea, from the oil, gas, and energy that transport from Persian Gulf or the African country. And definitely the Indo-Pacific Bay of Bengal is also one of the center of the Indo-Pacific strategy. If we look at even the trade, quarter of the world's trade that passed through Bay of Bengals. And the place where the strategic interest of the major power, East Asia and the South Asia, is basically intersect in the Bay of Bengal. And one of the things that we should also highlight that the Bay of Bengal in the Indo-Pacific region, the way it aspired the regional Indo-Pacific concept is that has to be rule-based, not in a particular country or any hegemonic power singularly dominate this Bay of Bengal, rather than the operational framework should be based on international rules, norms, and values. Now, as we have seen under the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Bay of Bengal get traction compared to the previous years, but as it continue in the following years, the traction will get even momentum. So these are the 5 factors which I think would drive the Bay of Bengal's geopolitical significance. And definitely economy would be the heart and center of this calculation. And then the infrastructure and the connectivity project that has taken by regional and extra-regional powers such as China, United States, and Japan, and definitely the volatile domestic politics of this country, and definitely the global geopolitical environment and national security, non-traditional security will also drive. So I will try to touch down a couple of these points here. So we have seen, especially in Bangladesh, that blue economy concept become popular, and it also is strongly related with the infrastructure, that mega infrastructure-based development initiative Bangladesh has been taken so far. So Bay of Bengal country, the littoral country, if we see their growth rate, for example, even most of the South Asian country, we have seen the 7.3% over the last 10 years. But before that, when the Asia as a continent has economic miracle happened, so Bay of Bengal country was not one of the prominent lead. Basically, Northeast Asian country was leading that development momentum. But in recent years, we have seen that the Bay of Bengal country is also participating in this development initiative. That is one of the main factor here. And the other issue will drive the Bay of Bengal economic calculation is that offshore labor-intensive industry. We have seen that Northeast Asian countries, Japan, China, Taiwan, South Korea, they are moving forward capital-intensive and high-tech industry, and therefore their labor-intensive industries such as garment and other manufacture, which probably will be shifting towards Bay of Bengal countries such as Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even Pakistan or India. And therefore, the economic prospect will be higher. And the population of this Bay of Bengal, most of this country is also looks good, especially in Bangladesh. For example, youth population is 20%. Population age between 15 to 24 years, where we have seen Northeast Asian countries, Japan and China, their population demographic is the main problem. And other things is that the Bay of Bengals is also would be important because of the energy consumption of the developing economies such as India and China. The oil import, its prediction is that by 2030, Chinese oil import will increase 75%, where India is with 95%. And for both countries, the Bay of Bengal will be an important transport hub. And other things is that Bay of Bengal also play as an economic highway of the world. If we look at the fact, half of the container traffic of the world is passes through Bay of Bengal. And the port along the Bay of Bengal, whether it's Chittagong or Chennai or Colombo, Hambantota, these kind of Bay of Bengal port also handle 30% of the world trade. On the right-hand side, if you look at the infrastructure need, I prepared this statistics here based on Asian Development Bank report, we say that as you can see, the blue color is the infrastructure need of these regional countries, and then the average growth in the green. And then definitely the last slide, you can see the gap. And South Asia and Southeast Asia, these are the most countries located in the Bay of Bengal, and you can see that the significant need for infrastructure development, which is insufficient to provide the existing development mechanism, whether multinational development bank or donor country. And therefore, the other new initiative, whether U.S. under Indo-Pacific strategy, that DFID or AIIB or Chinese Belt and Road Initiative can significantly contribute toward the infrastructure development in this Bay of Bengal region. The second point would be the domestic and geopolitical factor of the Bay of Bengal region will also drive the calculation of the Bay of Bengal as a whole in the Indo-Pacific region. Left-hand side, as you can look at even the Myanmar, for example, one of the main problem there is Bangladesh is one of the sufferer from this Rohingya and Rakhine issue, and you can see the number of events happened from 2010 to 2019 and the death of fatalities. And millions of Rohingya flee from Myanmar and now they are in Bangladesh. And other domestic factor, we have also seen that Bay of Bengal country, religious extremism, whether its neighbor as India, that has spillover effect in Bangladesh and the greater region. And most of the Bay of Bengal country, even though to some extent they are democratic and stable, but in other aspect it also fragile and democracy is not well institutionalized. That kind of domestic factor will not confined within the national boundary, rather than it will transcend over the boundary and affect Bay of Bengal as a region as a whole. And then the geopolitical great power competition, even though it is the sentiment that Bay of Bengal country does not want to participate in this binary choice or the geopolitical calculation, but we have seen that this type of country even cannot stop them, it affect one way or another. Therefore, the competition between regional or extra-regional power will affect Bay of Bengal countries' choices, preferences, and their calculation. However, they are not only proactive victim of this great power competition. Middle powers such as Bangladesh and others can also play a greater role to shape and reshape those kind of great power competition in their favor. And other things also that Bay of Bengal provide a kind of evidence to the world, where other part of the world we have seen that the maritime conflict between and among country. For example, Bangladesh seek UNCLOS to find the resolution of the maritime conflict between Myanmar or even India. And both cases we have seen that Bangladesh win the verdict of the UNCLOS, which can provide a kind of evidence for the rest of the Indo-Pacific region that the rule-based order should prevail. And definitely one thing we all understand, that we want cooperation and for betterment, but even in the current environment in Ukraine war, that could give us a lesson that how unexpectedly the major power can wage a war that can affect a relatively smaller or middle power country, and therefore we have to be cognizant of all of the aspects that may occur in down the road. Now, the final part, I will say that securing the Bay of Bengal as a part of the greater development, and especially to ensure the interest of Bangladesh and other Bay of Bengal country, would require these four components. First, it would be utmost important to realistically acknowledge that the world cooperation is an important as indeed in interest of all countries in the Bay of Bengal. However, the competition between and among great powers and regional and extra-regional power will sustain to some extent, and therefore we need to understand then what are the reality, what are the limitation of the Bay of Bengal country, and how they can navigate, not only focusing on the either of these aspect, whether cooperation or competition, rather than cognizant of both, and being proactive in policy making going forward. And definitely Bay of Bengal country need to ensure that whether any single country, whether regional or extra-regional power, singularly does not contour or dominate Bay of Bengal, rather than every country, based regardless of their size or military power or whatsoever, the Bay of Bengal remain a plural and rule-based waterway where every country can ensure and play a constructive role in the development for their national and regional development. And although there are differences between the geopolitical calculation, but one thing also need to understand that non-traditional security, whether drug trafficking or global climate change, which is hugely affect Bangladesh, for example, would require certain degree of consensus among those countries, and it is indeed the interest of all the Bay of Bengal country. Therefore, these kind of non-traditional security and other areas which are indeed in the mutual interest of the Bay of Bengal country, that kind of governance mechanism should be built on based on consensus. And finally, I think the one thing also for especially pertinent for Bangladesh, that Bay of Bengal is an strategic waterway. It is an important part of the Indo-Pacific, whether Chinese Belt and Road and other strategic calculation. But oftentimes we have seen that the discourse of Bay of Bengal, Bangladesh participation, is not in international forum as it's supposed to be. Therefore, Bangladesh policymakers should also focus on that how to increase discourse power in international forum and assert that Bangladesh role it can play in the Bay of Bengal and global governance. With that, I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Anu Anwar. Actually, you deserve a round of applause for that. I particularly dwell on your last slide on securing the Bay of Bengal, and I think the points that you raised do resonate very much with me. We in the Bay of Bengal need to understand that we do have to work together towards a rules-based framework for governing the Bay of Bengal. And that will mean governance of multidimensional aspects of the Bay of Bengal. It's not just connectivity, it's management of resources, conservation of resources, and the ecological dangers that we see present, and how do we stop those from spreading further, how do we contain it and actually get rid of it. So thank you very much for your paper. I'll take this opportunity of requesting all the people who have presented papers to send us the copies, because we will collate all of these and bring them out in a publication as soon as possible. And even the panelists or discussants who will discuss these papers, if at your leisure later on you can put in 1 or 2 pages what your thoughts were, because they would be invaluable in the volume that we intend to bring out. Let me now call on, I'm going to slightly reverse the order. So instead of Mr. Shariful Islam, I'll call on Nilanthi if you are ready. Recognizing that you may want to leave soon to catch up on some sleep that you have lost for being with us. And similarly, I'll try to do the same for Professor Charles Morrison when we come to the discussion session. Nilanthi, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's really an honor to be part of this important conference, and thanks to Independent University Bangladesh for organizing it. I appreciate the opportunity to share my views from my personal research. My paper is about the Bay of Bengal as a model for law of the sea in the Indian Ocean. And I think it speaks to the theme of this panel, which is the interest of an open Indo-Pacific for maritime and waterways connectivity, as Ambassador Karim has just mentioned. The Bay of Bengal, I find, is an understudied maritime basin of the wider Indo-Pacific region, and it deserves greater attention for its contributions to stability and the legal order. So in my paper, I make 3 points. The first essentially considers the wider context of the international legal order in the Indo-Pacific. And then the second really looks specifically at the Bay of Bengal as a model in the Indian Ocean for its success in maintaining a robust law of the sea in the wider Indian Ocean. And then third is really the critical role of Bangladesh in contributing to this success. And that also entails Bangladesh's partnership with the United States to help advance stability in the Bay of Bengal and the wider region. So for the first point, when we talk about the international legal order in the Indo-Pacific, China and its actions often come to mind and have really been a driver of this conversation over the past decade. Specifically, its assertive activities in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, essentially in the Pacific portion of the Indo-Pacific theater. And the UN, the Law of the Sea Convention UNCLOS, essentially sets the conditions or the expectations for international law in the maritime domain. And China's actions over the past decade, they appear to many observers to be in disregard of UNCLOS. And we've seen the use of maritime forces to block the movement of smaller countries' vessels, the use of water cannons, and a 2016 arbitral tribunal actually rejected China's maritime claims in the South China Sea. And it's interesting because China essentially chose to ignore that arbitral process and the decisions, even though they are legally binding. And this is against the wider context, too, of really the U.S. and China, as we heard earlier in the panel, this discussion about great power competition. And you saw the United States in its 2017 national security strategy talk about this reemergence of great power competition and discuss China. Also, its summary of the national defense strategy in 2018 also talked about this. The Biden administration has largely continued this focus on great power threats, albeit under the framework of strategic competition. And Russia is also part of that as well, as we're seeing now with the Ukraine war. But these activities, especially in the Indo-Pacific, they have significant implications for the wider international community's respect for the rule of law. And for its own part, the U.S. conducts its freedom of navigation program to enforce its rights to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows. And it's interesting because the U.S. will conduct these operational assertions or these freedom of navigation operations in the exclusive economic zones of its allies and partners with maritime claims that the U.S. considers to be excessive. So it's interesting because this also includes Indian Ocean countries such as India, such as Bangladesh. But what's interesting to note is that these are even differences in legal interpretations between allies and partners, but they don't become the thorn in the sides as we've seen with like when we're talking about China and its assertive activities in the Indo-Pacific region. Those are considered to be of a higher level. So it's interesting to see Washington essentially formally aligning its policy toward China's claims in the South China Sea with the 2016 International Arbitral Tribunal decision on the China-Philippines dispute in these waters. And the Biden administration has essentially upheld that position. And earlier this year, the State Department put out a very detailed legal analysis called Limits in the Seas that talks about Beijing's claims in the South China Sea as being unlawful. So this is essentially the wider context of uncertainty and instability that really characterize the waters of the Western Pacific. So the second point that I want to make is looking at the Bay of Bengal essentially as a noteworthy exception to this pattern of instability in the Indo-Pacific. And the Bay of Bengal, it sits in this wider context of Indian Ocean security. And there's been this trend to link the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as one region, this Indo-Pacific strategy. But I think it's important to note that the Indian Ocean, it still remains a distinct theater from the Pacific, with few exceptions. We just don't see in the Indian Ocean the various types of maritime contestation and disputes that we see in the Pacific. There are some exceptions, like Mauritius, for example, the fact it continues its fight for the Chagos Islands. There are some legal battles that continue to be fought. Mauritius has won a lot of legal victories and diplomatic victories over the UK, but in terms of on the ground, that continues to be a battle that it's continuing to fight. But it's doing so lawfully and peacefully. And for the most part in the Indian Ocean, we've seen more of a convergence of interests and cooperation in the region. The multinational counter-piracy effort is one example of that, where countries will cooperate at the sea, at the operational level, whereas their capitals back home will be at loggerheads sometimes. Also in the Indian Ocean, we've seen countries ranging from China to India to South Korea pursue exploration rights from the UNCLOS's International Seabed Authority, or the ISA. And China is conducting survey missions in the Indian Ocean and doing so lawfully. So this is a wider backdrop to our discussion, where I think we can think about the Indian Ocean serving a role as a laboratory for cooperation in a way that the Pacific and with its various maritime disputes, it cannot support. And so when we view this context of Indian Ocean security, the Bay of Bengal really stands out in helping to contribute to this successful outcome. And Bangladesh has played a leading role in the advancement of the legal order here. And it's interesting because this pursuit of stability, it was born out of contestation over the maritime disputes between Bangladesh, Myanmar, and India. All three countries, they wish to conduct exploration for resources in their exclusive economic zones, which were disputed. And for its part, Bangladesh saw very clear threats in the deployment of maritime forces from both Myanmar and India in 2008, which were providing security for survey ships. So a very clear military threat for the Bangladesh Navy in particular at sea. So the fact that Dhaka had essentially made the decision to pursue stability in the Bay of Bengal and through multilateral legal means is quite noteworthy and important for the wider region and stability. And it's also important to note that Bangladesh has been at the forefront of discussions to use multilateral institutions, for example, establishing SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, or BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative. And so we saw Bangladesh pursue the resolution of maritime disputes through legal venues, such as ITLOS, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, for its dispute with Myanmar, and the Permanent Court of Arbitration for its dispute with India. And so you can see how this pursuit of security through legal norms, especially by a smaller state, that helped to set a precedent for the Philippines' decision to pursue the resolution of its own maritime dispute with China via the Permanent Court of Arbitration. And so I think you can make the case that this is really a tangible example of how the Bay of Bengal, it served as a prior model for advancing the region. And so that leads me to my third point, which is essentially is Bangladesh's key role in catalyzing this stability and encouraging the use of multilateral institutions and really demonstrating their value through these successful outcomes. And it's notable because Bangladesh has confronted challenges since independence, as we were well aware of, including natural disasters, which required international relief operations. But we've seen over the years DACA greatly improving the country's disaster preparedness and response capabilities. It's also established coastal crisis management centers and cyclone shelters across the country. And some of this was in collaboration with the United States. And so it's essentially the country has strengthened its internal capabilities to withstand major weather events in the Bay of Bengal. And so it's interesting to see this transition Bangladesh has taken from being essentially formerly mainly a recipient of disaster relief to becoming a provider of relief. And we saw in 2016, the Bangladesh Navy delivering relief to Sri Lanka after its floods. Also, Bangladesh provided relief to Maldives during the 2014 water crisis. And more recently, Bangladesh has agreed to its first ever currency swap with Sri Lanka, which has been in a deep economic crisis. So Bangladesh is contributing to stability not only through legal avenues, but also through economic avenues as well, and helping to elevate the Bay of Bengal as a region. And this is part of the country's wider trajectory, seeking to graduate from LDC status and boosting its garment sector and exports, which hit a new height recently, despite the pandemic, with $4 billion in exports in a month. And beyond Bangladesh's national efforts, another key role that it plays, it's through its partnership with the United States in the Indo-Pacific region. DACA pursues its own independent foreign policy, but its use of international legal mechanisms to resolve conflict, it converges with a U.S. interest to uphold international law and advance stability in the waterways. So to sum up, essentially, Bangladesh is really standing on its own terms as a growing country, graduating from LDC status, really making that turn from being a recipient of relief mainly to a provider of relief, and helping to build international institutions like SARC and BIMSTEC, and seeking to resolve disputes in international legal venues like ITLOS and the Permanent Court of Arbitration. All of these activities essentially contribute to the greater project of building stability in the Bay of Bengal and the wider Indo-Pacific. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Nilanthi. I think you've explained very clearly how Bangladesh is graduating from having been an introvert, focused on consolidating the state that was founded in 71, to becoming now leading in regional cooperative efforts and helping others in the region. I'm going to deviate from the format a little bit because one of our guests who's here, Rear Admiral Khurshid Alam, he's the chair of another committee on Indian Ocean in the IORA. He has to go for a meeting virtually, which he'll do from my room upstairs. So I'll let him make his comments and then disappear for some time, and then I'll come back to the other presenters and the discussants. Admiral Khurshid Alam.
Ambassador Tariq Karim and all the distinguished guests, professors, teachers, and students, whoever listening to me, good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the little bit of presentation I have probably on the slide. And I had great expectations to see Nilanthi Samaranayake here today, but I could only see her on the Zoom because I had been discussing issues with her for the last 10, 12 years. But let me start. Well, what is the background? We are talking about the open and interconnected Indo-Pacific maritime waterways connectivity. The background is very important. If you see the background, after almost about 30 years, the iced Christmas tree are on fire. And that's what is happening in Europe, and that's probably one of the greatest, you can say, the happenings of the recent times. And that's what tells us that what is actually the global scenario, contemporary global scenario, you know. It is a new world order is unfolding, you know, because time is uncertain and the changing geopolitics everywhere. There is conflict, insecurity among the states, rise of non-state actors, populism, nationalism, and also terrorism. All three are probably acting. There are governance challenges. So I'm not going in discussing all of this, but just to show you that this is what is the Indo-Pacific is. If you can see the big circles, they are the millions of barrels. The biggest one is the 17 millions of barrels of oil are actually passing every day. And the medium-sized one are 15 and lesser one is 3.8 through Bab el-Mandebs. And all through Indian Ocean, you can see there are naval bases, either belongs to America or China or even Japan. Japan, for the first time, has a naval base in Djibouti, along with USA, China, and other countries. So that's one of the important factors we need to probably see. And then, if you see the oil transportation through the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal, what you're talking about is what is today starting, and then you can see the 23 onwards, 2030 onwards, is going to increase almost double the oil moving from one part to another. So this is what you can say that, the great routes passing through the Bay of Bengal of all the shipping, 66% of this and 74% of the containers actually originate from Asia, and this is passing through. And you can see all the marine resources, although we say that 350 nautical miles are with the coastal states, but beyond that, there are a lot of marine resources which are being actually looked for by many of the countries. Then we have the Sustainable Development Goals. The sea has come as a goal 14, which is also important aspect to be seen. And more importantly, you can see this one. You see the ships. These are very important. All the ships, the white dots are ships. They are passing through from the Malacca Strait to the Bay of Bengal, to all the other countries, and then passing over to Sri Lanka, to the straits and others. These are all white dots. That means the shipping of the business, trade and commerce is going to be a very important factor for all the countries in the region. You can see up to the Gibraltar, it is taking us on. Then what is the debate on the world order? You see, you can see that is the world order is out of order, the future of the international system after this Ukraine crisis, and who will run the world? That's another question is also in the background is coming. The world order is a contested concept, Well, big powers, I don't have to say, they definitely have a bigger say in the world orders. But world orders is also a body of rules and norms, and also you can see the system of functioning, the United Nations to so many organizations. If you look at this tree, then you will find that we have so much of regional, sub-regional, and international organizations, and you don't know really who is doing what. And frankly speaking, that's another problem that nobody is in a position to solve the problem of others. So for Bangladesh, we have a geostrategic location, as has been already said. I don't have to repeat it further. So we are in a good position to look at us and then we see. So the order and connectivity is a new manifestation. We need connectivity. Connectivity is a tool for cooperation and also integration, and that is very much needed. And global flows, as I have shown you, that is, of course, is increasing everywhere, and that's important for us in many respects. Well, you can say that evolving new alliances of Asia-Pacific. What are the evolving alliances we see there today in the Indo-Pacific? First is core principles of, you can say, Indo-Pacific strategy, We say rule of law, freedom of navigation, overflight, free trade, everything. There are all good words there. That's in the Indo-Pacific strategy. Then, of course, why we have got this question of Quad? It's a security concept. And once the security concept comes, the good words taken a back stage. There is no doubt in that. So Indo-Pacific strategy, where Bangladesh fits in, yes, we are getting security assistance from US, we are getting, India, Japan, everybody is supporting us with power and everything. There is also this big B, Japan is supporting us in the Bay of Bengal Industrial Growth Belt in a big way. There is a deep sea port coming up, and we are getting a lot of help from Japan as well in the Bay of Bengal, and also Belt and Road. The Belt and Road is another initiative by the President Xi Jinping. Of course, it is trying to advance Asia's economic integration. It also says contribute to peace, stability, and common development. This is what you can see, the South Asia's maritime connectivity, which Ambassador Tariq Karim has very passionately saying, this is what is the connection we had both on land and on the sea, but this is no more there. So for Bangladesh, I think we need to go back to this connectivity. So we can have a South Asian connectivity. We have tried. We can have also BIMSTEC connectivity, and we can also have the IORA connectivity. So Bangladesh is in the center. If we have the connectivity, probably we will improve our economic integration as well as economic development. And the productivity, trade, finance in the greater, Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin, there is no doubt that this can be connected again and realigned with the existing requirement of the trade and commerce, and which will help not only Bangladesh, but also the countries nearby to us. Yes, Bangladesh is a business-friendly governance country. It is a responsive and responsible leadership we have. That's one thing is our asset, and that's why our Prime Minister has said that physical connectivity is important in ensuring overall peace, progress, and stability across South Asia. And as well as multimodal connectivity is also required, but we also believe in connecting ideas, knowledge, technology, culture, people, road, rail, air, movement of goods, services, and investment. So that means she has almost covered everything in case of connectivity, and this is what we need to move forward. Well, she is a visionary leader. I'm not going to probably describe all this, just to show that, So for Bangladesh, friendship to all, malice to none. And this has come from the, you can say, from the foreign policy as for the people of Bangladesh has desired this, and our father of the nation has said this candidly, the friendship to all and malice towards none. So how much we can actually deviate from this principle in giving priorities either to connectivity or to trade or to culture or to ideas and other things, whatever we may call. So Bangladesh, in case of this evolving order, we can, of course, derive development aspirations and values of Sonar Bangla, and we should be guided by this principle, whatever I have said. We must engage with a mutual trust and respect, securing win-win outcome. That's what is important. And also complementarities. So peace and stability and development should be our goal. Our concluding thought, the existing orders are being challenged by the fluid geopolitical realities. New alliances orders are evolving, such as BRI, IPS, and others, and defense-centric approach may generate controversy and divergence. That's what we feel, that if you say Quad, that brings different things and different perspective. A free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific seems all right. These are progressive ideas. We don't have any problem with them. Investment in trade and science, technology, innovation, that is also, there's no problem for us. But for economic dependency of some countries, yes, on China is an issue for others, but not for us. It must generate convergence among various stakeholders. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. And new initiatives need to be taken, contextually understood and integrated nationally. Once you see this picture, you see, this is a picture that people on the right, they have actually maritime refugees. They have gone through the maritime routes, but they are actually in the bushes with the ice. But if you see the refugees coming from across the land, especially from Ukraine, they are given all the help needed, including making up their beds for welcoming them. So there is a contrast here. We must, overcome this contrast. We must consider human being as a human being. Only then probably whatever we talk about, rule-based everything, will probably come into play. You see, this world is actually, you can say that is under transformation, questioning the existing order, there is no doubt in that. And it is posing a complex geopolitical challenge with possible inclination towards nuclearization. What I say this, because this war will actually tell us where the world will go, how the world order will be actually regulated thereafter. Whether we go for a nuclear bomb, because one nuclear bomb, Ukraine actually gave up all the facilities of nuclear bomb. If Ukraine would have remained a nuclear country, today his condition would not have been same. So many of the countries in the developing world, having money, will probably think twice now whether to go nuclear or to get more arms and weapons. And this will create again an arms race. So let me finish that with this slide, last slide, that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must overturn the fastest lion or it will be killed. And every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the slowest gazelle or it will starve. So it doesn't matter whether you are the lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. So that would be my submission to you, that whether it is Bangladesh or others, whether we are a poor or a developed or a developing country, we must be running for our stability, for peace and development, come what may in the future. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Admiral Khurshid Alam, for those inspiring words. And yes, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for having taken the time to come and sharing your thoughts with us. I'll now revert back to the original format. We have one more paper presentation. That's Mr. Shariful Alam, Assistant Professor, Rajshahi University. 10 to 12 minutes, Mr.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. And then we'll bring in the remaining discussants.
Okay. Respected chair of the session, Tariq Karim sir, my co-panelist, distinguished discussants, distinguished guests, my dear students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Okay, I'll be talking here on Bangladesh's role in maritime space. Since two of my other co-panelists, they talked about Bangladesh's role in the present context. So I will be basically focusing on past as well as the future. So if we look at past, Bangladesh inherited a strong maritime legacy. You know, the Chittagong, which was, for centuries, Chittagong was used as a cosmopolitan city for traders from Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world. And due to the location of Bangladesh, Bay of Bengal is defined as the third neighbor, while Indian Ocean is defined as the fourth frontier of the country. So if you look at the past, when Bengal, undivided, when there was undivided India, Bengal was the richest province in the world. In that context, traders from around the world came in our region to do trade. So, because Bengal had maritime access through Bay of Bengal. And so this is how, we had a strong maritime legacy. And I want to mention another thing that given the maritime context of Bangladesh, it is found that traditionally Bangladeshis were seafarers, traders, and boat makers, and as well as shipbuilders. So if you look at the global history of global economy or trade, you will see that once Bengal was the center of global economy. when Bengal exported textiles from all over the world. You know the delicacy of muslin, which was exported through all over the world. So this is how, Bengal had a rich tradition. Particularly, I want to mention another point, that is, Bengal was also a leader in ship making as well as in boat building. Today, we are ship breakers, but once we were the leader in ship building. And even, I want to emphasize that even the Royal Navy had a number of ships which were used or employed in battles, which were built in Chittagong. So this was the tradition, rich tradition, or you can say history of Bengal. Now, if I come Bangladesh as a sovereign state in 1971, if you look at, in the post-1971 era, making Indian Ocean as a zone of peace was the key motto or foreign policy principle of Bangladesh under Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And Bangabandhu promoted this idea of zone of peace, Indian Ocean as a zone of peace, at different forums, including the United Nations, including, Commonwealth conferences, non-alignment conferences, and so forth. So Bangladesh, though it is conventionally seen that we always see Bangladesh as a norm taker or idea taker, but once Bangladesh also played the role of norm maker. Bangladesh promoted this idea, which was also endorsed by the United Nations General Assembly. Now, from this past, if we look at the future, Bangladesh has become the chair of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. So, I was wondering that what Bangladesh can focus as a chair of IORA. So, I think Bangladesh needs to focus on blue economy as the priority area of IORA chair. And among the blue economy sectors, Bangladesh needs to focus on marine fisheries. Why marine fisheries? Because I found three basic reasons. First, marine fisheries are important for food and nutrition security of the region. Second, both in the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region, marine fisheries stocks are already depleted. In addition, the alarming sign is that the huge dead zones are found in the Bay of Bengal. And in my study, I'm doing PhD on blue economy diplomacy for Bangladesh. So in my study, I found that there will be intrastate as well as interstate conflicts because of these marine fisheries in the Bay of Bengal region. And finally, marine fisheries sector also needs to be prioritized because the continuing decline will have greater security implications that I already mentioned. So what can be done? As a chair of IORA, what Bangladesh can do? First, I found, to me, Bangladesh needs to focus on the protection of marine fisheries from depletion. In this case, marine protected areas needs to be created at the regional scale. Second, it is also suggested that through the forum of IORA, Bangladesh needs to focus on preventing IUU fishing. If you look at the history of IUU fishing, once we were so much rich, and it is called in Bengali that Bhabte Mase Bangali, because we had so much, Bay of Bengal had richness in terms of marine fisheries, but today it is declining. It is one of the major reasons is IUU fishing. Foreigners from developed countries, even Japan, in 1943 they came in Bay of Bengal and done this IUU fishing. There are fishermen from Thailand as well as from other countries, as well as other foreign countries. So this needs to be checked. Fourth, 21st century is called the Maritime century, and it is the age of blue economy. And to explore and harness maritime resources, there is no alternative to promoting maritime education, science and technological innovations in the maritime domain. So, Bangladesh should take the initiative in convincing the IORA member countries to take the initiative, to establish that's called IORA Maritime University. So it is high time to establish this university to harness the blue economy potentials. If the African countries, with due respect, if African countries can establish such a university even 1990s, so why can't we? So we should not be lag behind. So fifth, academic discussions and debates are necessary for promoting maritime consciousness. The world is moving forward in science, technology, research, and innovations. The Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region also need to come forward. Therefore, to promote maritime education, the flagship journal of the Indian Ocean Group, that's called Journal of the Indian Ocean Region, that needs to be disseminated among the faculty members, among students, and among researchers in the region, but it is not disseminated widely. So Bangladesh, as a chair of IORA, can take the initiative to disseminate the journal as much as possible among different stakeholders in the region to promote maritime consciousness in the region. Sixth, Bangladesh needs to focus on engaging people of the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region in protecting the ocean. Maritime knowledge among the people in the region is very poor. Thus, people usually conceive the ocean as a dumping space. Very few people know the oxygen they breathe. Half of them comes from the oxygen. Half of them come from the ocean. So, if the ocean dies, people will also die. Thus, arranging mass awareness raising activities like ocean-related essay writing competitions, debates, seminars, and conferences becomes necessary to promote maritime consciousness. Bangladesh can also take the initiative to include ocean affairs. I think that is really important because knowledge transfers from generation to generations through classrooms. So Bangladesh needs to take the initiative to include ocean affairs as a course in the course curriculum at undergrad as well as secondary level, so that the future generations will be aware or will be conscious about maritime consciousness. Seventh, as the chair of IORA, Bangladesh needs to focus on fostering regional maritime cooperation because today maritime cooperation is the key to the management of the global commons. But how should Bangladesh do that? In this case, Bangladesh needs to present the rationale why the Indian Ocean countries needs to promote blue economy in their foreign policy formulations and executions. In fact, blue economy will receive emphasis in foreign policy making when the diplomats and other stakeholders will be skilled and trained on the subject. It is also imperative to strengthen regional maritime institutions where the next section focuses on. Thus, to foster maritime cooperation, Bangladesh needs to focus on strengthening existing regional architecture like BIMSTEC and IORA. In fact, regional institutions are necessary for the norms creation and information sharing that helps member states to coordinate their behavior in a mutually beneficial way. Finally, Bangladesh needs to play a proactive role in strengthening both of these organizations to promote a rules-based maritime order that Bangladesh promoted since the early century. My final point is that maritime knowledge, education, research, technology, and innovations are necessary for the sustainable use of maritime resources in the Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region. Thus, it is strongly suggested to establish IORA Maritime University where Bangladesh needs to play a proactive role as the chair of IORA. Bangladesh must drive for a sustainable Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean region for the sake of upcoming generations. And it is high time to realize that the state of the ocean's health and the unpredictable changes underway there that threaten it and the entire planet may represent the most existential threat to society in our lifetimes. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your valuable presentation on the subject of how we can enhance regional connectivity and why regional cooperation and why we should do that. Let us not lose sight of the fact that Bangladesh, while a relatively new member of the Committee of Nations only for the last 50 years, has consistently punched well above its weight in advocating better relations with all neighbors and promoting regional cooperation either in the larger framework or within a sub-regional framework. We took the initiative for SARC, we took the initiative for what is now the BBIN, but initially it was the South Asian Growth Quadrangle, which didn't get off the ground. We were co-sponsors of the initiative for BIMSTEC, And now we are thinking larger. If BBIN can happen, even some of it can happen. That's the nature of the beast that we are astride on today. And therefore, this process we have to continue. Thank you very much, and I look forward to reading your whole paper. We'll now come to the discussions. We have two constraints here. So let me ask Professor Charles, are you in a great hurry to leave? Okay, thank you very much for being so accommodating and kind. So may I bring in Anaswa Basu Chaudhary? Is she here? Great, because she came in late in the day to join us, but she has to leave immediately after this for another meeting. So Anaswa, over to you. 10 minutes, will that be okay? 10 to 12 minutes, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everyone, distinguished guests, panelists, and the participants. It's my pleasure to take part in this prestigious, special, and timely event today. And I'm grateful to Ambassador Tariq Karim and IUB for engaging me in this discussion. Well, our session is on an open and interconnected Indo-Pacific, maritime and waterways connectivity. At the very outset, let me share some of my views on maritime connectivity through waterways, and I'll comment on the papers presented here later. Well, since morning, we have been talking about interconnectedness, collective actions for collective benefits in the Bay of Bengal region, in wider Indo-Pacific. Here, the fact remains that we are living in an increasingly interdependent world, and connectivity has now become the buzzword for describing the nature of interdependency. In the current geopolitical scenario, engagement at several levels with neighboring countries and connecting with East and Southeast Asia assumes utmost importance, reinforcing the need for regional integration, and the BIMSTEC is poised to contribute constructively to the efforts of regional connectivity. The Bay of Bengal is located at the heart of the Indo-Pacific, and its auxiliary, the Andaman Sea, is the littoral's geostrategic gateway into the wider waters. All the littorals have their own vision for Indo-Pacific region, cutting across the ideas like a free, open, inclusive, and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations, peaceful resolutions of disputes through dialogues, and adherence to international rules and laws. In these contexts, the focus is on maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology, and academic cooperation, and of course, trade connectivity and maritime transport. The COVID-19 pandemic has started changing the global economy, there is no doubt about it, affecting manufacturing, surplus chains, and also the movement of people and goods. There is also a need to understand the dynamics of collaboration between the member countries of the Bay of Bengal in the Indo-Pacific region, with special reference to other stakeholders like ASEAN countries. We have not yet touched this particular segment in our discussion. Of course, the USA, Japan, South Korea, Australia, including transnational agencies like the Asian Development Bank. Well, it has already been identified that the Indo-Pacific is a major market comprising 36 countries with more than 50% of world's population, 62% of world's GDP, and 46% of world's merchandise trade. However, For this market to be optimally utilized, there is a need for greater connectivity and freedom of navigation, including safety and security from threats such as maritime piracy and terrorism. Now, in this context, it is also important to keep the concept of ocean governance in consideration, which is traditionally motivated by a need for positive transformation, boosting ocean-based economic development, reversing global biodiversity loss, and securing the rights of marginalized coastal communities. We will know how maritime governance has been a casualty of strategic competition in Southeast Asia. The region is marked by jurisdictional overlap with territorial claims in the South China Sea, posing constant threat to peace and stability in the region. Apart from the USA, Japan, the Philippines, and South Korea, three countries, they have already stood in the way of China's aggressive ambitions. Indeed, there is pushback from ASEAN as well. Against this backdrop of regional milieu, the BIMSTEC has gained its salience. And there is, of course, no doubt about it. And the ASEAN outlook envisions the expansion of cooperation with IORA and BIMSTEC. So now, having set the context here, if we focus on exclusively on maritime connectivity in the region, we see that the BIMSTEC Master Plan for Transport Connectivity, which was endorsed in the 17th BIMSTEC Ministerial Meeting in 2021, got successfully adopted in the recent concluded the 5th BIMSTEC Summit, on the 30th. And it has a long journey. Since its inception, transport and communication is identified as one of the key sectors of cooperation. The first meeting of BIMSTEC expert group on transport and communication held way back in April 2001. They have identified various relevant issues, including transportation, cross-border facilitation, multimodal transport logistics, environment, infrastructural development, aviation, as well as maritime transport, along with communication linkages and network. Accordingly, the leaders, they engaged the Asian Development Bank to carry forward a study on different projects to enhance the connectivity in the Bay of Bengal region, which has an important component of maritime connectivity. ADB came up with 167 projects, and they have made out of it 66 priority projects for the enhancement of connectivity in the Bay of Bengal region. Well, while we are dealing with these maritime connectivity, I think it is important that that it was decided that the master plan would serve as a geostrategic document that guides actions and promotes synergy among various connectivity frameworks, such as ASEAN Master Plan of Connectivity 2025. Maritime transport already, as we have seen, and our paper presenters and also discussants have already talked about that how maritime transport is actually playing an important role in trade generation in all BIMSTEC member countries, including landlocked Nepal and Bhutan, directly or indirectly. The majority of each country's international trade, except in the case of Bhutan and Nepal, is carried by sea. In fact, most intra-BIMSTEC trade in terms of tonnage is currently carried by the sea. But in this particular domain, when we are talking about different aspects of maritime connectivity, I think there are two residual key areas of concern that are common for all the littorals. One, access to deep water to enable large vessels to call, and second, the container handling performance at some point of key ports in the Bay of Bengal. Well, now I think it is time to focus on two important aspects. I think one of these aspects has already been touched upon by Ambassador Karim, and that is inland waterways. Though we know that initially inland waterways was not included within the purview of BIMSTEC, there were a number of reasons behind the decision. First, there was a lack of clarity in regional development in relation to farm development programs at that time. And secondly, this form of transport was only applicable to three member states, Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar. And thirdly, inland waterways were principally used for domestic, rather than international transport. But it's true that India-Bangladesh protocol, which was signed in 1972 for the enhancement of inland waterways for trade and transit, it is a kind of pioneer step which enhanced cooperation in inland waterways. But it's true that more attention has been given in the recent past to strengthen cooperation in dealing with inland waterways as linking projects with the major ports of member states in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Myanmar. As we all know that Nepal has shown its interest to be part of these broader inland waterways connectivity along with India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, and the virtual conference between India and Bangladesh, we saw that, which took place in 2020, we saw that both governments have agreed to expand the scope of inland waterways, by including some important waterways like Barak, which will definitely help to facilitate transport of goods from different parts of India to the northeastern states of India via Bangladesh. And it has been possible because of a very cordial and strong relationship between Bangladesh and India at this moment that we are enjoying. With these words, if we look at coastal shipping under the BIMSTEC framework, it has been envisioned as a potential area of cooperation after India-Bangladesh Coastal Shipping Agreement 2015. India-Thailand coastal shipping agreement can be a significant area of bilateral cooperation. And as we have seen that in last concluded BIMSTEC summit, the leaders have talked about, has approved the coastal shipping agreement, and it has been agreed that 20 nautical miles from the seashore of all the littorals, it will be utilized for the betterment and strengthening of coastal shipping agreement. I think it is also a very important part. And there are also plans for port-to-port cooperation between India and Thailand, where Ranong is coming up very fast to give a boost in coastal shipping agreements between Thailand, Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar. Such cooperation would depend a lot on port-to-port dialogue and the demands and requirements of the respective ports. So, therefore, within next 10 years, it is expected that the member states of BIMSTEC will expedite the pace of connecting the region with wider Indo-Pacific. And our colleagues have already talked about cooperation within BIMSTEC in the segment of marine fisheries. I think it is important to understand, the complex nature of marine activities related to transgression, which both Bangladesh, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka are facing. So time has come to deal with these issues along with other non-traditional segments. And we know that these segments have playing very important role among the leaders to take decision. Before I conclude, I think I must congratulate all the three paper presenters for their interesting papers. And while reading their paper focusing on role of Bangladesh in ensuring the interconnected Bay of Bengal in the Indo-Pacific region, three important points have come up in our mind to wrap up my discussion. First, while dealing with Bangladesh's role in strengthening cooperation in the Bay region, what has been the implications of the country's relations with the middle powers? Some of us, we have touched directly or indirectly Japan, but what is country's role with South Korea and also the ASEAN, as I have already pointed out, because ASEAN countries are very, very important stakeholders in the Bay Littorals, and I will follow Ambassador Karim to promote the concept of BIMSTEC Plus, because all other three members who are not at this moment members of BIMSTEC in the Bay of Bengal region, these are Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, they are in one way or the other, they are very much, they are being engaged and affected due to various concerns that we are also facing. This is number one. Number two, as we know that foreign policy is a subset of domestic policy, so has domestic political milieu played any role not only in Bangladesh but also in other, the countries who are member states within BIMSTEC? This is also very interesting point to understand the shift of foreign policy towards the convergence of, cooperative mechanisms to have a much more strengthened, constructed Bay of Bengal, which can be a soft belly for wider Indo-Pacific. And the third idea or the factor that has come up in my mind, that is whether we are saying that all the littorals are equipped to promote rule-based order or a structural legal paradigm in dealing with maritime connectivity and maritime security. Are we really enforcing the clauses of UNCLOS only, or we are also imagining for an indigenous, homegrown set pattern of rules exclusive for the Bay, where consensus building approach will prevail to strengthen cooperative mechanism. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Anushwa. Anushwa is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and I've had the privilege of working with her for over several years on connectivity-related projects between Bangladesh and India, as well as Bangladesh and in the region. I'll now bring in Professor Charles Morrison, Adjunct Senior Fellow and former President, East-West Center. He's been associated with the center since 1980, and has a very distinguished background. Professor Morrison, the floor is yours. Again, 10 minutes or so, if that's okay.
I'm very mindful of the time constraint, Mr. Ambassador, and I want to congratulate you and everyone who's organized this, who's sponsored it, who's participated in it. It's a great learning experience. And I have to admit, and I'm embarrassed to do so, that this is my first trip to Bangladesh, and it comes virtually. So I'm here learning. Anwar has been trying to teach me over the last 3 years, and I did read his paper in draft form. I thought Professor Islam's paper added an awful lot on history and really an agenda of action on fisheries and ocean issues. And Nilanti Samaranaki's paper, I thought, provided a really interesting contrast between the Bay of Bengal as a kind of model mechanism for the peaceful resolution of disputes in the South China Sea, where we just don't see that. And the problem, I think, in the South China Sea is when you have one actor who's not willing to abide by the rules, not willing to go to arbitration. It can be a small country, even that can be problematic, but when it's a huge power, then it's very problematic. So I cannot add anything more on the Bay of Bengal, and so I thought I'd pick up a little bit instead on two things. One is the free and open Indo-Pacific idea, and the other is the Bangladesh's middle power idea. And we have lots of free and open Indo-Pacifics now. We have the French, we have the Japanese one first, we have the French one, we have the ASEAN vision, we have the Australian one, and we have the American one. So in some ways, there seems to be kind of a consensus around the words and a little bit of a common vision there. But if I think of just the American one, we've started using this term, not officially yet during the Obama administration, of course officially during the Trump administration, and now continuing during the Biden administration. And those are very different administrations. And so what it says is there's a continuity underlying it. And the continuity really is the rise of South Asia. In the 1950s and 1960s, the US thought of Asia, and it was natural to think of the two big powers in Asia as being China and India. But then in the 1970s, 1980s, until about 10 years ago, we really made a dividing line between Southeast Asia and East Asia on one hand, and South Asia on the other hand. And what Indo-Pacific does is kind of try to erase that dividing line. As Nilanti said, it's still there in some ways, but the consciousness of South Asia has really risen, and the consciousness of Bangladesh has risen. Bangladesh is now the South Asia's second largest economy. It's a fast-growing economy. It's very successful. And 30 years ago, few people would have imagined that. So that's important. Now, when I talk to some of my friends, like Chinese friends or French friends even, about their concepts of this, there's two things that I hear. One is that, the American concept is anti-China. And the other is that it's too military. And I think both of those are misguided. There's elements of both as drivers and components in a sense, but it's really a basis of principles and of norms and of values that Americans believe should be the governing values in global affairs. And there's a national dimension of that. And so the national dimension is that countries should be free. I'm talking about the free part now. Countries should be free of coercion. We've seen a terrible demonstration of an effort to force a country to do something, dissolve itself basically in Ukraine. But that's the rules-based order internationally. And then at the domestic level and individual level, it's really the freedom of people to have think their own thoughts, to express themselves, to get information that they need, to make their own judgments without coercion from the governments. And then if you think of the open part is also different elements very closely connected with connectivity And many other panelists and our previous discussants already mentioned some of those dimensions of connectivity, and they go far beyond infrastructure. They are the connectivity of ideas, connectivity of people moving across borders for education, maybe permanent immigration, business connectivity, institutional connectivities, many that we enjoy. And so that's a statement of a kind of world that I think the Americans would like to see and that we think that we can thrive in, and which I think is actually quite conducive for smaller powers if we could achieve that kind of world. Now, on the military side, also the U.S. military has embraced the Indo-Pacific concept. It has become the name of the command here in Honolulu, which is behind me in the virtual screen. But many other aspects of Indo-Pacific, or the free and open Indo-Pacific policy are relevant too. The economic aspects, which I think could be improved in the United States in the last Biden statement, the educational aspects, the immigration aspects, which are very complicated domestically, politically, and the flow of ideas across borders. So if you look at, particularly I thought the Trump administration's statements on its FOIP policy were a little more detailed so far than the Biden administration's statements, but they do kind of become a list of activities rather than a real strategy. And so that's one of the weaknesses still. Like the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, is kind of a branding. And what's within that is not necessarily that well connected bilaterally to multilaterally. It's not necessarily connected in a deep way in terms of actual policy initiatives and so forth. So it's something still to work on. Finally, Bangladesh is a middle power. It is a middle power. There's lots of different kinds of power. There's structural power. India has structural power simply by its size, population, and its location at the center of South Asia. Then there's charismatic power. So we see an example in President Zelensky now, charismatic power. But then finally, there's entrepreneurial power. And I think, Mr. Master, you just expressed that very well, that the Bangladesh has played an entrepreneurial role in promoting SARC, in promoting peaceful resolution of disputes of its maritime border areas with its neighbors, but that the game still needs to be stepped up because we are in a very difficult period of global history, whether we're talking about South Asia, East Europe, even the Americas. We know that there are lots of contending ideas about how society should be organized, how international society should be organized, how to maintain the peace. And so the importance, I think, of middle powers as kind of brokers between large powers, as generators of ideas, become very important. At the end of the day, it's really international relations about respecting each other. And it doesn't matter whether you're big or you're small. The ideas in our globalized society can come from everywhere and anywhere. And so we have to listen to each other carefully. We have to take each other's ideas and treat them on their own merits. And of course, we evaluate it in terms of our own national interests and so forth. That's understood. But I think that if we follow those rules, if we follow the guidelines provided by the concept of free and open, we will be a much better world for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Morrison, for your words of wisdom and for your compliments directed to my country and the role it has played so far since its birth. Yes, we are a bridging nation, and for us, international relations cannot be a zero-sum game. It has to be a win-win game. And if we have to be a win-win game, then we must provide a bridging role, not between countries only, but between leaders and thoughts and ideas and different approaches. Thank you very much for taking the time for being with us. And now, last but not least, and I thank my good friend, Professor Anamika Badua, for her patience. She is a professor at the IIT Guwahati, and she is a professor of ecological economics in the Department of Humanities and Sciences. But I know her as a fellow comrade in trying to get things done, working collaboratively on the Brahmaputra River, not just between Bangladesh and India, but drawing in Bhutan and China. And we've been at this for almost 8 years or more. So, Anamika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Karim, for having me here, and privileged to be sharing this panel with such distinguished speakers. I am so impressed with all the papers that I read, and let me tell you, this is not an area where I'm an expert. As Ambassador Karim mentioned, I mostly work on the Brahmaputra basin and to some extent Ganges and Tista. So I will not be actually able to kind of comment on your papers, but it has been a great learning for me when I read all the 3 papers, which I actually requested Ambassador Karim to share it with me so that I can go through and understand what the papers are talking about. So congratulations, and I'm excited to read the full papers. So taking from what's been discussed, I want to bring in 3 important things into my discussion based on my work, my experience. I would actually define myself as a researcher and also a practitioner. As Ambassador Karim mentioned, I was facilitating a dialogue between these 4 riparian countries from 2013 onwards, and which ended in 2019, and we had varied experience. A lot of learning during that process when we were facilitating, and Ambassador Karim was very much a part of this entire process. So one of the things what we realized is when we are talking about cooperation across, whether it's a regional cooperation, whether it's a bilateral cooperation, to me it doesn't really matter. What matters most is how the countries are looking at this cooperation. One of the things that we felt is that the way the cooperation is looked itself is so widely different, and that's where the conflict sometimes comes up. And again, I would say that many a times we feel that we need to go for cooperation which is multilateral, which is at the regional level. But what my experience told me is that even if we are starting with a bilateral cooperation, it can go a long way. But what needs to be first understood is how each country understands this cooperation. What are those benefits that we are trying to share between the countries? Unfortunately, if you really focus on the South Asian river basin, we are too engrossed with geopolitics and hydrology. And you can't even actually do a good research because of this kind of, the politics plays such a significant role, which obviously plays across the world in any transboundary river basin, because you are talking about a river which is crossing boundaries. But what I found missing, and which I would take from Anu Anwar's paper, is that, there are several things to look at. And one of the most interesting things that we kind of don't look at is the economy, infrastructure, and connectivity. Again, I really cannot agree more with Professor Charles that when we say connectivity, it is just not the inland water navigation. And this is where we need to actually widen the definition of cooperation. And that's what one of my papers also, I have very clearly stated that the way cooperation is defined is that is all about cooperation. Then track 1 diplomacy happens and we are signing a treaty. Cooperation is also when me and Ambassador Karim is working together. Cooperation is also when 4 countries' researchers are trying to generate knowledge. Cooperation is also when the journalists of 4 countries are trying to, come up with a media reporting, and these are happening. All of these are happening even in river basins such as Indus, where journalists have come together and worked together and developed pieces together, written pieces together. They are together in a WhatsApp group and they are sharing information about their basin countries. So I think these kind of things somewhere gets overlooked when we are so engrossed in looking only into the geopolitics, the domestic politics, the foreign policies, and how the track 1 diplomacy is taking place. Why are we not also focusing on multiple level of diplomacy, which is up there and it's bringing fruitful outcomes? Coming to the economy, and now we are talking about blue economy, and I am one of person who works a lot with water, and one of my work is on virtual water trade. And what we really realized is that if you really look at the trade patterns between, if I only focus on India and Bangladesh, because compared to any other nation, India, Bangladesh has more or less had a stable relationship even now. And given the fact, are we really engaged in trade? And the answer is simply no, we are not. Interestingly, when I look at the export bundles and the import bundles of India and Bangladesh, it's quite interesting that many things that Bangladesh is importing can be imported from India, but it's not happening. And similarly, India can import many from Bangladesh, but it's coming from the rest of the world. Similarly, in terms of export. One of the things that I strongly feel is that when, as an economist, we are looking at the comparative advantage each of these countries had in trade, we only looked at land, labor, and capital. We did not look at the water resource. And if you really bring this water resource now, your entire comparative advantage is different. Maybe there are certain food grains which India should not be producing or Bangladesh should not be producing, it should be traded. But where are we? Are we really focusing on these things? Are we really looking at cooperation through economic cooperation or through trade? But we, again, going back to what I just mentioned, our cooperation is so much driven by the politics and the geopolitics where we are still stuck. The another point that I wanted to make here is about this whole connection of inland water navigation. Always, in many forums where I have been invited or where I have been facilitating, I hear a lot of positive note about inland water navigation, and it's a very good sign of cooperation between India and Bangladesh. But what seems to be missing here as well, the ground realities related to the inland water navigation. Why are we still not able to take off? It's not just about, again, signing a treaty. There are multiple stakeholders who basically needs to be involved in this whole process of deciding of this kind of a cooperation. Because what you really see is that there are so many challenges, while at the political level, it seems to be an excellent transformative change that is happening between these two countries, which will bring a lot of development, employment opportunities, etc. But if you really look at it, at where it is going to happen, there are several challenges. Somewhere we are not able to really focus on those challenges, and so we are not moving ahead the way we should have been moving ahead. And this is where I feel in South Asia, water diplomacy can play a very important role. We also heard one of the speakers talking about domestic policies, and I strongly believe that what is the country's even national water policy would also reflect how are you dealing with your neighbors. It is extremely important that we understand each other's domestic policies. Unless we don't understand each other's domestic policies, we do not understand the foreign outlook of the countries, whether we are inward looking or outward looking. That would be reflected in our own country's domestic policies. So I think there are several areas where still a lot of work needs to be done. And one of the ways to break this, the monotonous way of working that we are only focusing on the geopolitics around the river is, we need to actually get all stakeholders together when we talk about water diplomacy. And this is because we cannot actually talk of water only with the Ministry of Water Resources. We need Ministry of Foreign and External Affairs on board, because water is an integral part there as well. They take a lot of decisions. And when water has actually moved from Ministry of Water Resources to foreign, you can clearly see that it's no longer an issue of water as a survival, but it is more about security. And so you definitely need them on board when you're talking about water and water diplomacy. I also feel that it's important that we move away from only political or politics around water. We need to also look at the economic and social, relationship with water. The way we define connectivity, like I mentioned, cooperation itself needs to be broadened. And I think these are some of the very important work which needs to be looked up. We need to promote these kind of understanding so that we break this kind of way of looking at the relationship between water and the nation. I'm going to stop here, Ambassador Karim, and thank you very much for having me here once again.
Thank you very much, Anamika. You bring in a lot of accumulated wisdom from our interlocutions with the various stakeholders, whether they are within the country or within the region or beyond the region in your remarks. And I think I particularly like to pick on the connectivity or the interconnectedness that you brought out, that policies cannot just be made at the top. You have to bring in stakeholders at the bottom. So when you're talking about rivers and cooperation, the people of the river who actually inhabit the entire stretch of the river on both banks, from the headwaters to the mouth, their concerns, their fears, their hopes have to count in. And this is where the nexus between domestic politics and foreign policy comes in. The foreign policy has to take into account the domestic concerns and fears, and therefore that affects the way states react with each other. And, for me also it was a learning experience, the way we used to interact with China. I still remember our last meeting in Shanghai, where the Chinese actually gave us signals which were basically similar to what we were saying. So, remaining engaged, understanding different stakeholders in the process, informing the government of what is happening can have results. But it is sometimes a painful process, it is a painstaking process, it requires a lot of patience and perseverance. Thank you very much. With that, I have come to the close of this session. We have run a little over time, my apologies for that, but there were very fulsome discussions on very thought-provoking papers, and hopefully, once again, I repeat my request, all paper presenters, please send a copy if you have not done so, and all discussants or panelists, please do put your thoughts, what you've just shared with us, on 1 or 2 pages, doesn't have to be long, on your thoughts on this subject and the papers and whatever it is, because we will put them all together in one volume. Thank you very much. A big round of applause for the participants. And thank you, audience. A big round of applause for you for your patience. I will now yield the podium and the floor. I think I was told we can dispense with the tea, coffee or tea can be brought here for those at the podium. Others can slip out, grab a cup, come back, because we are running, I think, 15 minutes behind schedule already, right? Okay. Thank you very much.